It was a self-imposed rule. Valerie Justice would not date anyone until her 15-year-old daughter, Erin, graduated high school in their Naperville, Illinois town.
Erin and I were extremely close. I had been divorced for 6 years, and she was the joy of my life. I wanted to get married again, but I wanted to concentrate on getting her through high school first. After that, I could get on with my own personal life.
But in 2003, when Erin spent her summer vacation with her father, Valerie soon felt a void in her heart.
I missed Erin tremendously, so I would visit my mother often because we lived not too far away from each other, and she was retired, and she was babysitting all the time.
And one afternoon, while visiting her mother, Valerie was happy to bump into a familiar face, 37-year-old Lawrence Lovejoy.
My mother had started babysitting for his little girl. And so many times when I would go by my mom's house, he was there. Lawrence was going through a divorce, and he was actually spending quite a bit of time there at my mom's. He was a little rough around the edges, just a t-shirt and jeans kind of person. But he was funny, and he was very charming.
Well, Lawrence was easygoing, and he was easy to talk to. He worked as a painter, and he was trying to get back on his feet.
Lawrence had been mentioned to my mother that he was looking for a place to stay. So I made the suggestion that since Erin was gone for the summer, he could share my apartment. He'd have a place to stay, I'd have some help with the rent. And I thought that would be a good arrangement.
Lawrence thought so too, and was more than happy to accept.
I would look forward to going home knowing that someone was there. He was rather entertaining, he made me laugh, and we started spending time together.
My sister Valerie was very serious, and Lawrence was the funny guy. Valerie needed that break in her seriousness by his sense of humor.
By the end of the summer, Valerie decided to break her own rule.
One of the goals that he had expressed to me was to own a home, and I've always wanted to own my own home. He wanted to really progress through life. I found myself attracted to him, and then we ended up in a relationship.
But when Erin returned home in August, she made it known she wasn't keen on having a man around the house.
It was hard for her to imagine anyone else being in the house besides her and I. She didn't want to lose her privacy. But I did not want to end the relationship.
But Valerie did want to do things right.
So at that point in my life, it was my desire to be more Christian. I did not want to continue to live with Lawrence without being married to him.
So Lawrence came up with the perfect solution.
Lawrence looked me straight in the face and told me, "I'm ready." And would I marry him? Yes, yes. So I did say yes, that I would marry him.
After 4 months together, Valerie and Lawrence tied the knot at the local courthouse with Erin by their side.
So it was a simple ceremony. No big wedding dress, no flowers. We walked out and we were holding hands and we were on our way. The future seemed very bright.
But that brightness would soon turn to darkness as Valerie realized the choice she made would destroy everything she held dear.
He had a whole nother side to him.
She had no idea this monster was lurking in her house.
I just cried and cried. I just could not believe that he would do something so vicious.
In November of 2003, newlyweds Valerie Justice and Lawrence Lovejoy were eager to start their life together with Valerie's teenage daughter, Erin.
I was excited. I had everything that at this point that I desired. I had my daughter by my side. I was married again. And we started the process of trying to see if we could qualify for a mortgage and buy a home.
It was very important to Valerie to become a homeowner. They were on the hunt for the right house that they could all be happy in.
But the following month, Valerie came home to find Lawrence and Aaron in a screaming match.
Lawrence was so enraged, they were yelling back and forth. He was very upset that Aaron had been on the phone all afternoon, supposedly talking to boys. I didn't quite understand why he was so concerned.
There was a disconnect in their parenting styles. Lawrence felt he was going to be the one to discipline her, but Valerie didn't feel it was Lawrence's place.
I informed him that any decisions that had to do with Aaron were to be totally left up to me. He really got upset because I was basically telling him that I don't need your help. And he wasn't happy about that.
So Valerie did her best to smooth things over.
I talked to Aaron and, asked her to just wait until I'm home, before you get on the phone, and then that way there won't be any problems.
For the next few months, things seemed to be going according to plan.
There were no more big blowouts between Aaron and Lawrence. We bought a new puppy for the family, and we're making plans to purchase a townhome.
But there were a few sacrifices. Valerie took on a second job as a cashier to earn extra money for closing costs, which meant Aaron was at times a latchkey kid.
Erin would come home on her own, and I would call her and check in on her. So, we had a good system of keeping in touch with each other. Plus, Lawrence was home during the day, and then he worked the midnight shift at his company.
And Valerie couldn't help but notice that Aaron and Lawrence seemed to be fighting less often.
Aaron was in driver's ed, and so Lawrence volunteered to take her out driving. When they got home, they were both laughing, and I was relieved to see that things were getting better.
So Valerie set her sights on the closing of their new house, which was set for March 5th, 2004. But just 2 days before the closing, when Valerie made a routine call home to check on Aaron, everything changed.
Aaron answered the phone, and I said, "What are you doing?" She sounded just kind of aloof. Are you okay? Like she was preoccupied. We got off the phone, but something just didn't sit right with me.
And when Valerie received a call just a short time later from a police officer, she knew in an instant something was terribly wrong.
Lawrence had a dark side.
It was just a nightmare.
I was in complete shock. What he did was just devastating.
On March 3rd, 2004, Valerie Justice felt a knot in her stomach after receiving a call from the local police.
The police officer said that they had my daughter. There was a problem. He said that I needed to come to this address he gave me. That's all he would tell me. I hung up the phone with him. I was scared. Now I'm like, what the heck's going on?
Valerie was in a panic as she immediately raced to the address.
I just had no idea what could possibly be the problem. When I arrived, the police officer immediately took me up to an apartment. It was a friend of Aaron's who she went to school with.
Officers led Valerie into the living room, where she found Aaron sitting on the couch, visibly shaken.
That's when the police officer told me, according to Aaron, Lawrence had sexually assaulted her. So I said, "What do you mean?" Aaron said she had come home from track practice. And Lawrence offered to give her a massage. She told him to stop, and he just kept going. I was shocked. After all, he had a daughter of his own. And it really upset me. I was like, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? I'm listening to what she is saying, and I'm trying to absorb it all. I didn't want to believe that this was really happening. But I made it very clear to Erin that I was going to support her no matter what.
At the hospital, Valerie stood by Erin's side as a doctor administered a rape kit.
The doctor told me that there were no physical signs of penetration. That put a shadow of a doubt in my mind. I was struggling with the whole thing. I questioned her, and I said, if this for some reason was because you're having a problem with him, I said, tell me now, because this is pretty serious. But she assured me that she was telling the absolute truth.
At first, I just didn't believe it. I was like, no, that just can't be. He's just not like that.
Meanwhile, at the police station, Lawrence told investigators something else entirely.
Lawrence indicated that Erin was just upset at him because he had questioned her cell phone usage. And because he was questioning her, she made the entire story up.
Without a confession, police didn't have enough to hold him.
There was saliva found on her cheek and on her breast. And it was the decision of the DuPage County State's Attorney's Office not to file charges until the DNA results came back from the crime lab. So Lawrence was not arrested that evening.
In the meantime, Valerie had saved enough money to close on the townhouse herself and settled on a new living arrangement, which didn't include Lawrence.
I got everything moved, and I didn't really know where he was staying. I told Lawrence I did not want him around my daughter until we had gotten the DNA results. If the DNA results came back positive, my plan was to divorce Lawrence immediately.
But just a few weeks later, Valerie found herself in a bind and was compelled to ask Lawrence for a favor.
The puppy had gotten sick and needed to have a follow-up appointment with the vet. I asked Lawrence, and he made the appointment, and he was going to take her to the vet.
There was no chance Erin would run into Lawrence at the house, since she was going to spend the week with her father. But at the last minute, Erin's father canceled.
He was supposed to pick her up in the morning, but he had called to say that he was not going to be able to do that. So I called Lawrence, and I told him that he would need to move the puppy's appointment. And then he said to me, okay, I will call the vet and do that right now. So I was relieved.
Within the hour, Valerie decided to check in on her daughter and make sure she was waking up.
When I called, I didn't get any answer. And I'm wondering, why isn't she answering? I started to get a little anxious. I finally went to my boss and I said, I just need to go home and check and see what's going on. I was thinking, maybe she just overslept, maybe she was in the shower. But, I had no idea. I had no idea.
And when Valerie arrived home, nothing could have prepared her for the horror she would find.
It was the most heinous attack that I have ever seen.
It was unimaginable what he did.
There was blood everywhere. My whole world just ended.
On the morning of March 27, 2004, Valerie Justice prayed that her daughter Erin was okay as she arrived home.
I started to call her name and was not getting any response. Immediately, I knew something was wrong. I got into the hallway, and I could tell there was something on the wall. I ran into her bedroom, and she's not in her bed. Across the hall was her bathroom. I pushed the bathroom door open. I saw Erin in the bathtub. There was blood all over the floor. I knew when I saw her that it was too late. I felt like I was suspended in space. It just felt like I was just spinning.
Stunned with horror, Valerie ran to the hall and called 911.
Now all I can remember is the dispatcher telling me that I have to stop screaming and that they were sending somebody over. I just sat down on the stairs. I couldn't move.
Police arrived within minutes and found that whoever had murdered Erin resorted to a disturbing level of violence.
Erin was stabbed, she was bludgeoned, and then she was drowned. Erin had lethal doses of cold medication in her system. I believe she was forced to take it. There was a rather deep knife wound to her neck. Whoever did this had a lot of hatred in them. It was the most brutal, vicious, heinous attack that I have ever seen.
And Lawrence Lovejoy quickly rose to the top of the list as a person of interest.
The next day, we began interviewing Lawrence Lovejoy. From 7 until 12:30, he could not account for what he did and where he was at. But we didn't have enough evidence to keep him, so we had to let him go.
As investigators continued to gather evidence, Valerie tried to come to grips with what had happened.
It was so hard to fathom that someone could be that evil and do that to a helpless child. I knew in my gut that Lawrence was responsible for my daughter's death.
So I went to Copley Hospital. When I got there, all the kids was there. And I realized that it was real.
3 months later, the DNA found on Erin during the alleged rape came back as a positive match to Lawrence Lovejoy. And when police identified Lawrence's footprint at the crime scene, there was no denying that he was Erin's killer.
I believe Lawrence Lovejoy went over there to try to talk her out of filing charges against him for a sexual assault because he thought the results would come back with his DNA. And Erin was not giving that to him. He killed her in such a brutal way, I think he just snapped.
On August 20th, 2004, Lawrence Lovejoy was arrested and charged with the first-degree murder of Erin Justice. 1 month later, he was indicted on charges of sexual assault and sexual abuse.
I was absolutely sick to my stomach. I felt responsible. It was me who allowed this monster into our lives. It hits me like a brick.
Valerie now realized that Lawrence must have become obsessed with Erin.
His rage about Erin being on the phone was out of place. He had some jealous rage against Erin talking to boys. I think the reason why Lawrence offered to take Erin driving that day was to gain her confidence. Maybe she would feel close to him. But he didn't know my Erin.
In 2007, Lawrence Lovejoy went to trial and was found guilty of first-degree murder. In light of his conviction, the sexual assault and abuse charges were dropped. But because of a technicality with a blood test, the conviction was overturned 2 years later.
That was discouraging, but we knew we had to go to trial on this again. It was going to be another guilty.
Finally, in 2011, Lawrence Lovejoy was once again convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison.
It was rather bittersweet when Lawrence was convicted and didn't bring my daughter back. But I was glad that he couldn't be free to harm anyone else.
Today, Valerie is still haunted by Erin's death and wonders if she could have done more to protect her.
I never saw any sign that I needed to fear for my daughter's life. There just were no signs that he would have been capable of such horrible actions.
It was really tough. It hurts every day. But it's through the faith and conviction that we all carry on.
I know that in this world no one's perfect, but Aaron was perfect for me. We were a perfect fit. I look forward to seeing my precious daughter again.
Living near a place called Holiday, Florida might seem like fun, but for Crystal Kunkel, life was far from a tropical vacation. In the spring of 2002, after ending a 3-year relationship with the father of her newborn, the 22-year-old found herself transforming from a carefree young woman into a caregiver.
It had been 4 months since the last relationship. I was a single mother working really long hours at a window treatment company. I had a 6-month-old son, and between working and taking care of my son, it felt like I was going to have to juggle work and motherhood alone forever.
Romance seemed like a thing of the past until one day that March when Crystal saw a glimmer of hope.
My dad and I worked together, and I saw him and this guy, and I noticed that he was attractive, good-looking.
This is my daughter, Crystal. Oh, I don't think we've met before.
As Crystal's father introduced her to Tommy Garcia, one of her co-workers, she could tell right away that the 28-year-old was different.
The first thing I noticed was he was outgoing and nice.
And her instinct was confirmed over the next several weeks.
Tommy treated me really nice and sweet, and he would chat in his spare time at work. It seemed like he really liked me. I decided to show Tommy a picture of my son.
Oh my gosh, he has your eyes.
Tommy told me that he also had a young son. He was trying to get full custody of him. It gave Tommy and I a connection and made me feel like he was a really good family guy.
A few weeks later, Crystal and Tommy were eager to take their idle office chit-chat off the clock.
We would spend time with my son and with his son. I was having a lot of fun, and we were really falling in love.
Over the next 4 months, the two became inseparable and decided to take the next step.
I love being here with you. What if I moved in here with you?
Of course. It was great to have someone you could finally connect with and help raise my son. Tommy was like a single mother's dream come true.
So when Tommy took Crystal out for a romantic dinner on March 29th, 2003, and popped the question,
Crystal, will you be my lawfully wedded wife?
Yeah.
she didn't have to think twice.
Tommy seemed to be nice and genuine. And he treated my grandson wonderfully. And I was very happy for both of them.
Although the lovebirds initially planned their nuptials for the following year, another joyous event soon eclipsed those plans.
About 6 months later, we found out we would be having a baby. So we decided to postpone the wedding.
In February of 2004, Crystal gave birth to another bouncing baby boy, while Tommy gained custody of his 6-year-old son and adopted Crystal's first child. And 1 year later, the two were united as one in a magical wedding ceremony.
I had the perfect dress, perfect cake, everything was perfect.
It was a very good wedding, very nice, perfect start to a family.
We were both really happy. But having all these kids, we needed a little bit more money, so I decided that I would work at a local pharmacy. And Tommy took a job at a landscaping company.
For the next 6 years, the Garcias lived busy lives with a full house. But in October 2011, Crystal started to notice a slight shift in Tommy's typically predictable behavior.
He started to have some weird problems with the car. He called me about an hour after work one day saying that he was going to get the tire fixed. And he said he would be home in about another half an hour.
And when Tommy came home late again the following week, Citing more tire trouble, Crystal was puzzled.
He said, well, they must have never fixed it right the first time. I didn't have really any reason to doubt him, but I thought it was really weird.
Then, a few weeks later, things took an even stranger turn.
We were getting ready to head out for the day, and my son asked me for a toy out of the car. So I went to the car. I was looking for my son's toy. I saw this gun laying underneath the seat.
What are you doing?
In November 2011, after finding a gun in her husband Tommy's car, Crystal Garcia was starting to worry something was afoot.
What are you doing?
What is this?
It's nothing, all right? It's a pellet gun. It shoots air.
Tommy immediately got mad that I found it. And I said, what are you getting so mad about? Then he justified it, saying he played with it at work. I guess they would do different guy things during lunch. I thought they're all guys that work together. Maybe they do play with pellet guns. I don't know.
Why is it underneath the seat with all the toys? What if one of the kids had found it?
Look, it's nothing, all right? Just relax. I got it.
I thought it was kind of weird and suspicious that he was so mad about the situation.
Then, a few weeks later, as the couple attended a family event, Crystal noticed something creepy.
Tommy was talking to two young teenage girls, telling them that they were smart and beautiful.
Fill it out really nicely.
Seemed really inappropriate, and the girls felt a little uncomfortable by the advance he had made.
It turned the picnic into an awkward situation. I just found it very off base and unacceptable.
I felt embarrassed, so I confronted Tommy. He said that they'd taken it all wrong. That wasn't what he meant by it. He just justified it again, that everything was fine.
And on the night of February 15th, 2012, her husband's strange behavior reached its peak.
Tommy would play basketball with his friends, and he would usually come home around 10 o'clock at night, and it was getting to be 11:30 at night, and I started to get worried. And I was mad because he was out so late and he hadn't called.
Finally, Tommy walked in the door.
It's about time.
He was hyper, he was talking really fast. He was really excited. So I said, what are you doing coming home so late? He didn't think it was a big deal that he didn't call or anything. He said, I had to get the tire filled up with air. I was angry that it was another tire story. Just didn't really seem like it could be true.
Air in the tire.
Yeah, in the gas station. I found this phone.
Then he told me that he also found this phone by the air pump. He said it's a brand new phone. He said he checked in the gas station and they didn't know who it belonged to.
Nobody claimed it, so I figured one of our kids could use it.
Then he told me that he wanted to give our son the cell phone. I asked to look at the phone, but he wouldn't let me see it. He said that there was no information on it. It had been wiped clean. I thought it was kind of weird that there was this new phone that all the information had been erased from. I didn't really think it made sense.
Crystal told me Tommy was acting a little odd, and I told her just to keep her eyes open and make sure he's not just telling stories.
I found Tommy's behavior really confusing, and I didn't really know what to do to get to the bottom of it.
But Crystal wouldn't have to wait long.
The next night I was at work and I got a phone call. It was Tommy. He said that I needed to come home.
I need you to come home right away.
What's going on?
Miss Garcia?
Police officer got on the phone. I thought, oh my God.
In February 2012, after getting a call from her husband Tommy, Crystal Garcia was completely caught off guard when a police officer got on the line and said Tommy was being arrested.
The police officer said, "You're going to need to come home and watch the kids."
And then the police officer told her why.
What? I was completely shocked, and I thought there was some kind of mistake. I couldn't believe my husband could do that.
I'm on my way.
Her mind reeling, Crystal raced home.
I pulled onto our street. There was cop cars everywhere. My car was being seized. It was like something out of a movie. I was completely shocked, completely devastated that everything seemed to be falling apart right in front of me. The kids were in the window. Seeing the kids, the lights flashing, it was all like a nightmare. And my sons were looking at their father in handcuffs in front of the house. I felt that they shouldn't have to see something like that. They're probably scared.
Garcia, you can't talk to him right now. We're going to process them.
The cops didn't let me say anything. They didn't let him talk. They just told him, "Kiss me goodbye."
The next morning, when Tommy called from jail, he assured his wife that it was all a huge misunderstanding.
He told me that he did know the woman, and he said, "It's not what you think. I gave a girl a ride home once, and she'd made an advance, and he'd turned her down, and she was upset and accusing him of rape." I thought that was a little weird. But I felt like there was really no reason for me not to trust him. I just hoped that it was true what he was saying.
But when a detective showed up the next day, her faith in Tommy's story really began to wane.
He said this girl who had been raped lost something, and we've been looking for it, and we can't seem to find it anywhere.
You haven't found your cell phone.
And I said, "Oh my God."
Crystal's heart sank as she remembered Tommy giving their son a cell phone he said he found. And then the detective dropped a bombshell.
3 additional rape charges have been placed against Tommy.
Altogether, there's 4 rape charges and 2 kidnapping charges.
The detective explained that after Tommy's arrest, they discovered evidence that could tie him to 3 other rapes.
It felt like the whole world was crashing down. I was completely devastated. I couldn't believe that this could happen.
Crystal tried to stand on her own and try to muscle through it. She wanted to believe her husband was innocent. She wanted to believe that in the worst way.
I wanted to see what was really going on. So I got the police records at the county building, and I read the whole report.
Crystal was completely blindsided as she read that Tommy had admitted to being with all the victims. Devastated, she immediately confronted her husband at jail the next day.
I said, "I just looked at the police report, and it says you admitted to the police that you were with all of these women."
You read her report.
I said, "You told me that everybody was lying, the cops were lying, and this girl was lying." I said, "At what point are you lying?"
God, tell me the truth.
It was really the first moment where I knew he was lying.
Believe me.
I was really mad that not only that he'd done it, that he led me on to believe that he didn't do it. It was just coming to me all at once. I couldn't believe that he could do this to me, to the kids, to everybody. So I decided I was filing for a divorce. I felt like this is it. I'm done.
And as prosecutors prepared for Tommy's trial, Crystal would finally learn the whole truth. And it was more horrendous than she could have possibly imagined.
It was unbelievable.
This was just the tip of the iceberg.
It was just unreal to believe. I felt like I was with somebody I never knew.
In July of 2013, Crystal Garcia was still in shock when her husband Tommy went to trial for sexual battery and kidnapping and had been charged with 3 other possible rapes.
I had cried pretty much every day, like I couldn't believe that this had happened to me and happened to the kids.
In court, the horrible details of the crime finally came to light.
The night he came home from basketball with the cell phone, Tommy had been driving down the road and he saw a woman.
Tommy drove by this woman and asked her if she wanted a ride.
I said no.
And he came back a second time. And she said no again.
I said, get in the car!
They drove up to the wooden area. He forced her out of the car and performed several sexual acts.
Then he took her phone so she wasn't able to call for help. And as she was driving away,
she was able to follow his taillights out of the area. She was able to flag down a motorist and call the police. She was able to give a description of the car and actually a description of the perpetrator. Police used that information to put together a DMV photo array from which she was able to identify Tommy Garcia.
Between the victim's testimony, her cell phone, and DNA evidence that conclusively linked him to the crimes, there was no denying Tommy was the rapist. On July 26, 2013, after 2 days of testimony, Tommy Garcia was found guilty on both counts.
It was completely crazy that he definitely did it, that this was him. It was just unreal to believe.
It's a shocking thing to think somebody you've been married to is someone like that, a monster.
On the same day as the verdict, Tommy Garcia was sentenced to 2 consecutive life sentences and labeled a sexual predator. 7 months later, he pled guilty to the 3 other rape cases and received a 15-year sentence.
I felt like I was with somebody I never knew. I was devastated. I couldn't believe that I'd married somebody that was capable of something so horrible.
Knowing the awful truth about her husband, Crystal couldn't help but wonder if there were even more victims out there.
The times when he was having car problems, I wonder if there was more to it.
And she could barely stomach thinking of the young girls he had flirted with.
I worry that when he looked at other young people that maybe he had ulterior motives.
It's really unusual for someone who rapes to not have a history of other kind of violent or aggressive behavior. But we are not surprised to find that there may be others, and we have to hope others who have been their victims will come forward.
It seems just so unreal that he was somebody that I lived with. You know, you lock your doors every night and try to keep the bad people out, and really, I just locked the bad person in.
Today, Crystal still struggles with why her husband would suddenly choose such a dark path after 6 years of marriage.
There weren't any signs. He had a good family. He was good for so long, but something was wrong. Something snapped inside of him. I don't think I'll ever have all the answers.
He had everyone fooled. My parents, my grandparents, the whole family.
But Crystal is determined to put all the painful memories behind her.
I now wonder, do you ever really know somebody? But I'm doing good, and the boys are happy. My life is going in the right direction.
Houston, Texas, in the early 1970s was a city that seemed to promise endless opportunity. New neighborhoods stretched toward the horizon, families arrived in search of work, and teenagers spent long summer evenings riding bicycles, gathering in parks, or wandering streets they believed they knew by heart. It was a place where parents expected their children to return home before dinner, where neighbors recognized familiar faces, and where disappearances were still often explained away as youthful rebellion or a teenager's impulsive decision to run away. Few could imagine that beneath the ordinary rhythm of suburban life, a pattern was quietly taking shape, one that would eventually become one of the darkest chapters in American criminal history. At first, there was no obvious connection. One young person vanished, then another. Families searched desperately, posting photographs, asking friends for help, and hoping that the telephone would ring with good news. Days became weeks, and weeks became months. Each disappearance carried its own story, its own heartbreak, and its own unanswered questions. Yet investigators faced a difficult reality. Records of missing persons were far less organized than they would become decades later. Communication between agencies was limited, and many of the missing teenagers came from difficult family circumstances. Some were believed to have simply left home voluntarily. Others disappeared without witnesses or evidence that pointed toward a violent crime. Each case existed largely in isolation, leaving grieving families to endure uncertainty with little understanding that they were all connected by the same unseen threat. Unknown to the community, the individual responsible did not resemble the monster people might imagine. He was not a stranger hiding in dark alleyways or someone who forced his way into homes. Instead, he cultivated an appearance of familiarity. He was someone young people recognized, someone who smiled easily, someone whose presence did not immediately raise alarm. That contrast between appearance and reality would later become one of the most unsettling aspects of the case. His name was Dean Corll. Born in 1939, Corll grew up in a family connected to a candy manufacturing business in Houston. Because of that connection, he became known throughout parts of the city as the Candyman. The nickname sounded harmless, almost friendly. Local children and teenagers associated him with free candy and casual conversations. Adults often viewed him as quiet and polite. There was little in his public image that suggested he posed any danger. Looking back, that ordinary reputation would haunt investigators and families alike. It demonstrated how easily trust can be built when danger hides behind familiar routines instead of obvious warning signs. Corll understood people, particularly teenagers searching for acceptance, independence, or simply a place to belong. Rather than relying on intimidation, he approached them with kindness and generosity. Free candy was only one small part of the image he projected. He offered beer, lent money, promised jobs, invited young people to spend time listening to music or simply relaxing at his home. None of these gestures seemed extraordinary on their own. Together, however, they created an atmosphere in which suspicion rarely entered the minds of those who encountered him. Many of the young people he approached shared similar circumstances. Some came from unstable homes. Others lacked close supervision or spent much of their free time with friends on the streets of Houston. They were ordinary teenagers navigating ordinary lives, unaware that someone had carefully learned how to exploit their trust. They did not see themselves stepping toward danger. They believed they were accepting an invitation from someone they knew or from someone recommended by a friend. That trust became one of the most devastating elements of the entire case. As months passed, disappearances continued. Families experienced the same painful cycle over and over again. At first came confusion, then frantic searching, then the agonizing wait for answers that never seemed to arrive. Parents replayed their final conversations with their sons, wondering whether they had overlooked a warning sign or missed an opportunity to prevent tragedy. Friends questioned themselves endlessly, remembering ordinary afternoons that suddenly became precious memories because they were the last moments they had shared together. Meanwhile, Houston itself continued moving forward. Schools opened each fall. Businesses expanded. Neighborhoods grew. Life appeared normal to those untouched by loss. Yet beneath that appearance, fear slowly spread among families whose children had disappeared without explanation. Rumors circulated, but rumors are rarely enough to build a criminal investigation. Without physical evidence connecting the cases, authorities struggled to recognize that they might be confronting a single offender rather than a series of unrelated disappearances. This uncertainty became one of the defining characteristics of the investigation's early years. Every missing teenager represented another family trapped between hope and despair. Hope that their child might still return home. Despair that each passing day made that possibility seem more distant. What no one realized was that Coral was not acting entirely alone. Over time, he manipulated two younger associates, David Owen Brooks and later Elmer Wayne Henley. According to later investigations, Brooks had known Coral since childhood. Henley became involved in 1972. Their roles would prove deeply significant because they helped bridge the distance between Coral and many of his eventual victims. Through existing friendships and familiar social circles, they introduced other teenagers to someone those young people otherwise might never have trusted. The existence of accomplices made the pattern even more difficult to recognize. A teenager invited by a friend had little reason to suspect danger. Familiar faces created a false sense of security, allowing ordinary social interactions to conceal extraordinary evil. Years later, investigators would learn that Coral allegedly paid Henley for bringing victims to him. That revelation shocked the public, not only because of its cruelty, but because it demonstrated how trust itself had become one of the tools used to facilitate the crimes. Even so, throughout those years, the broader community remained unaware of the true scale of what was unfolding. Missing person reports accumulated, but they did not yet reveal the horrifying picture hidden beneath them. Families continued searching independently. Detectives continued working individual cases with limited information. Newspapers reported disappearances, but few imagined that a single individual might stand behind so many vanished young lives. History often remembers criminal cases through dramatic moments, the arrest, the courtroom verdict, the shocking confession. Yet those defining moments are preceded by quieter stories that receive far less attention. They are stories of empty bedrooms left untouched, birthdays celebrated without the person everyone hoped would return, parents staring through windows long after midnight, waiting for headlights that never appeared. Before investigators uncovered the truth, before names entered history books, before headlines spread across America, there were simply families living through uncertainty one day at a time. The Dean Coral case would eventually become known as one of the largest serial murder investigations in American history. It would expose profound weaknesses in the way missing persons were investigated and fundamentally change how many law enforcement agencies viewed repeated disappearances of young people. But at the beginning, none of those lessons had yet been learned. There were only unanswered questions, isolated tragedies, and a city that had not yet realized it was standing in the shadow of a crime far greater than anyone could imagine. In the chapters that follow, those scattered disappearances will gradually converge into a single investigation, revealing how an ordinary reputation concealed extraordinary violence, and how one unexpected night in August 1973 would finally begin to uncover the truth that had remained hidden for years. By the beginning of 1972, the growing number of disappearances had become impossible for some Houston families to ignore, even if the city as a whole had yet to recognize the pattern. Every missing teenager left behind an empty place at the dinner table, unanswered telephone calls, and bedrooms preserved exactly as they had been on the day their owners vanished. Parents searched neighborhoods, contacted relatives, questioned friends, and clung to every rumor that suggested their sons might still be alive. Hope lingered because, without evidence of violence, many believed that the missing boys had simply chosen not to come home. For investigators, each report presented a difficult challenge. The available information was often limited, and many of the disappearances seemed to have no obvious connection. One teenager had last been seen with friends. Another had mentioned going out for the evening. Others disappeared after leaving home with no indication that anything unusual had happened. Without a common suspect, a shared location, or physical evidence linking the cases, each investigation remained largely separate from the others. Behind the scenes, however, Dean Corll continued building the carefully crafted image that had protected him from suspicion. To many people who encountered him, he was simply a quiet man with an easy smile and a willingness to help young people. His family's connection to the candy business had earned him the nickname that many local teenagers already knew well. That familiar reputation lowered defenses before questions could even be asked. Corll rarely relied on force to gain someone's trust. Instead, he understood that generosity often opened doors more effectively than intimidation. Offering candy, lending small amounts of money, inviting teenagers to spend time listening to music, or promising temporary work created an atmosphere that appeared welcoming rather than threatening. These gestures seemed ordinary when viewed individually. Only years later would investigators recognize how they fit into a much larger pattern. Many of the young people who accepted those invitations shared similar circumstances. Some came from families facing financial hardship. Others spent long hours away from home with friends because there was little adult supervision. They were not defined by those circumstances, but they were more likely to encounter someone who appeared friendly and willing to offer attention without asking many questions. Corll recognized that vulnerability and repeatedly exploited it. A particularly disturbing aspect of the case was that he did not always approach future victims himself. According to the later investigation, David Owen Brooks had known Corll from an early age. Brooks moved comfortably within the same social circles as many local teenagers, making him an effective intermediary. Friends trusted friends, and introductions made through familiar faces rarely seemed dangerous. As time passed, another young man entered the picture. Elmer Wayne, Henley became associated with Corll in 1972. Investigators would later conclude that Henley played a more active role in locating and persuading teenagers to accompany him to places where Corll was waiting. According to Henley's later statements, Corll paid him for bringing victims to him. That revelation would become one of the most shocking elements of the investigation because it demonstrated how ordinary friendships had been manipulated into instruments of betrayal. The involvement of Brooks and Henley also complicated any effort to identify a pattern. A teenager leaving with someone he already knew did not immediately suggest foul play. Parents often assumed their sons were spending time with friends. Witnesses remembered seeing familiar faces together, not strangers behaving suspiciously. Each ordinary interaction helped conceal the extraordinary reality developing beneath the surface. Meanwhile, Corll continued changing locations. Rather than remaining in a single residence, he used different properties over the course of the crimes, including homes, a rented workshop, and a boat storage facility. These changes made it even more difficult for anyone outside his immediate circle to notice recurring activity connected to one address. The absence of a fixed location meant there was no single neighborhood where suspicions naturally accumulated. The city itself provided another layer of concealment. Houston was expanding rapidly during those years, with growing communities and increasing movement between neighborhoods. In such an environment, teenagers frequently traveled to visit friends, attend gatherings, or explore different parts of the city. Someone being seen in an unfamiliar area did not necessarily attract attention. Families, however, experienced a very different reality from the one visible to the public. Every day without answers intensified their uncertainty. Some continued searching for months. Others refused to move away, believing their missing sons might eventually find their way home. The emotional burden of not knowing became almost as devastating as confirmed loss. Without clear evidence, grief remained suspended between hope and despair. Law enforcement officers also faced frustration. They worked with the information available, but missing person investigations in the early 1970s lacked many of the resources and coordinated databases that later generations would take for granted. Communication between separate investigations was limited, and cases that today might immediately raise concerns about a serial offender were not always viewed through that lens. As more disappearances accumulated, the possibility of coincidence became increasingly difficult to accept. Yet suspicion alone could not solve the mystery. Detectives needed evidence, witnesses, or a breakthrough capable of connecting scattered reports into a single narrative. None of those elements had yet appeared. Unknown to everyone outside Coral's closest circle, the truth remained hidden behind carefully maintained routines. The public saw isolated disappearances. Families saw personal tragedies. Investigators saw difficult cases with too few leads. Only Coral and his accomplices understood that these events were connected. History often suggests that major criminal investigations advance through steady progress, but the reality is frequently the opposite. Cases can remain almost completely stagnant for years until one unexpected event changes everything. The Dean Coral investigation would follow exactly that pattern. For more than 3 years, answers remained buried beneath layers of secrecy, misplaced assumptions, and fragmented evidence. Then, during the night of August 8, 1973, an event unfolded inside one of Coral's residences that would abruptly shatter the silence surrounding the disappearances. What began as another meeting involving Coral and young people he knew would end in a confrontation no one had anticipated. Before dawn, the man who had remained hidden behind an ordinary public image would be dead, and within hours, a confession would begin revealing a truth so shocking that even experienced investigators initially struggled to believe it. The investigation that had stalled for years was suddenly about to become one of the largest homicide inquiries in American history. The events of August 8, 1973, marked the turning point that transformed years of unanswered disappearances into one of the most significant criminal investigations in the history of the United States. Until that night, Dean Coral had managed to remain hidden behind an image that few questioned. By the following morning, that carefully constructed facade had collapsed, setting in motion a chain of discoveries that would forever change the lives of countless families. According to the investigation, Elmer Wayne Henley arrived at Coral's residence accompanied by 2 friends. On the surface, there appeared to be nothing unusual about the gathering. Henley had become a familiar figure in Coral's life, and his presence did not suggest that anything extraordinary was about to happen. Yet the circumstances inside the house quickly changed. Henley later told investigators that Coral intended to restrain all 3 young people. At that moment, Henley realized that he himself might become a victim. Whatever loyalty or fear had previously bound him to Coral suddenly gave way to a desperate instinct for survival. Faced with what he believed to be an immediate threat, Henley reached for a handgun and fired multiple shots at Coral. The confrontation ended almost as suddenly as it had begun. Dean Coral died at the scene. For years, the man believed to be responsible for an unknown number of disappearances had escaped suspicion. Instead of being arrested after a lengthy investigation, his criminal career ended unexpectedly inside his own residence, not through police intervention, but through the actions of one of his own accomplices. In the immediate aftermath, nothing suggested that officers were about to uncover one of the darkest criminal cases in American history. When police responded to the scene, they initially viewed the incident as what appeared to be a straightforward homicide. A shooting had occurred, 1 man was dead, and another admitted responsibility. On its face, the case seemed relatively simple. Henley did not attempt to flee. Instead, he contacted authorities and informed them that he had shot a man. At first, investigators approached the case as they would any other fatal shooting. Their immediate objective was to determine the circumstances surrounding Coral's death. Questions centered on what had happened inside the house, whether the shooting had been justified, and whether Henley's account was consistent with the available evidence. Then the investigation took an extraordinary turn. During questioning, Henley revealed information that completely altered the direction of the case. He told investigators that Dean Coral had been responsible for the disappearances of numerous young males over several years. More importantly, he claimed to know where victims had been buried. The statement was almost impossible to comprehend. Experienced investigators are trained to approach confessions with caution, particularly when they involve extraordinary claims. A suspect may exaggerate, fabricate, or attempt to shift responsibility. Yet Henley's account included specific locations that could be verified. Rather than offering vague accusations, he directed investigators toward places where he said bodies had been concealed. The possibility that the missing person cases were connected suddenly became terrifyingly real. Investigators wasted little time following the information Henley provided. Their first objective was simple but emotionally overwhelming. They needed to determine whether his statements could be confirmed. Search teams began examining the locations identified during the interviews. One of the first major sites was a boat storage facility in Houston Heights. Until then, it had appeared to be an ordinary property, attracting little public attention. Now, it became the focus of an intense forensic search. As excavation work began, officers hoped they would either confirm or disprove Henley's story quickly. Instead, each stage of the search deepened the horror. Human remains were discovered. What initially appeared to be a single recovery soon became another and then another. Investigators realized they were no longer dealing with an isolated homicide or even a handful of disappearances. They had uncovered evidence pointing toward a prolonged series of killings. The discoveries did not end there. Guided by Henley's information, authorities expanded their search to additional locations, including High Island along the Texas coast and a wooded area near Sam Rayburn. Each new excavation carried the same grim possibility. Search teams worked methodically, documenting every discovery with extreme care. Forensic investigators understood that every recovery represented not only evidence in a criminal investigation, but also the remains of someone whose family had spent months or years searching for answers. For the relatives of the missing, confirmation brought a devastating mixture of emotions. The uncertainty that had haunted them for years was finally ending. Yet certainty came at an unimaginable cost. Many families had never stopped believing that their sons might one day return home. Every birthday, every holiday, and every passing year had carried a small measure of hope. The discoveries at the burial sites replaced that hope with irreversible reality. As investigators continued their work, the scale of the case became increasingly clear. The number of confirmed victims continued to rise. Each identification represented another disappearance that had remained unexplained for years. Each recovery connected another grieving family to the same horrifying truth. The investigation that had begun with a single shooting was rapidly becoming one of the largest homicide investigations the country had ever seen. Public reaction was immediate. Houston residents struggled to understand how such crimes could have remained hidden for so long. The realization that one individual had allegedly operated for several years without attracting serious suspicion created widespread shock. Equally disturbing was the knowledge that many victims had accepted invitations from someone they believed they could trust. Investigators also faced difficult questions about the role of Coral's accomplices. Henley's confession established that he had participated in bringing victims to Coral. Earlier evidence also pointed toward David Owen Brooks performing a similar role. Determining the extent of each man's involvement became an essential part of the investigation. Henley admitted that Coral had paid him for bringing victims. Brooks likewise became a central focus of investigators, seeking to reconstruct the sequence of events that had unfolded over several years. Every interview, every recovered location, and every newly identified victim helped authorities assemble a timeline that had previously existed only in fragments. The challenge extended beyond identifying victims. Detectives also had to determine how individual disappearances fit within the broader pattern. Records from different years were reviewed again. Missing person reports that once seemed unrelated were now examined side by side. Gradually, investigators recognized that the isolated cases which had frustrated law enforcement for years were all pieces of the same investigation. As the searches continued, the confirmed number of victims eventually reached at least 28. Even then, some investigators believe the true number might have been higher, though no evidence sufficient to confirm additional victims was ever established. The discoveries fundamentally changed the direction of the case. No longer was the investigation focused solely on the death of Dean Coral. Instead, it centered on documenting years of crimes, identifying every victim possible, and ensuring that those who had assisted Coral would be held accountable under the law. For many investigators, the emotional weight of the case remained profound. Every recovered set of remains represented a family whose search had finally ended. Every confirmed identity closed one mystery while opening another, forcing relatives to confront the painful reality of what had happened to someone they loved. The truth, buried for years beneath isolated missing person reports and hidden burial sites, had finally begun to emerge. The next challenge would move from excavation to the courtroom, where prosecutors would seek justice against the surviving accomplices, while the nation struggled to understand how one of the deadliest serial murder cases in American history had remained concealed for so long. As investigators continued piecing together the evidence recovered from the burial sites, the focus of the case gradually shifted from discovery to accountability. Dean Corll, identified as the central figure in the crimes, was already dead. That reality presented an unusual challenge. The man believed to be responsible for the killings would never stand before a judge or jury. There would be no public trial examining his actions, no courtroom testimony directed at him, and no opportunity for the families of the victims to confront the person investigators concluded had caused so much suffering. Instead, the legal process centered on the two surviving accomplices whose involvement had helped conceal the crimes for years. David Owen Brooks and Elmer Wayne Henley were both arrested as investigators worked to establish the extent of their participation. Although Corll could no longer be prosecuted, authorities remained determined to ensure that everyone who had knowingly assisted him would face justice under the law. Building the cases against Brooks and Henley required investigators to organize an enormous amount of information gathered during the inquiry. Years of missing person reports, witness interviews, excavation records, and statements had to be carefully examined and connected. What had once been scattered investigations now formed a single, comprehensive case that documented one of the largest series of murders uncovered in the United States at that time. For prosecutors, the challenge was not simply proving that Corll had committed the crimes. That conclusion had already been strongly supported by the evidence recovered during the investigation. Their responsibility was to demonstrate the role each accomplice had played in helping Corll carry out his actions. According to the investigation, Brooks had known Corll from childhood and had repeatedly introduced young people to him. Those introductions, which may have appeared harmless to outsiders, became a central issue during the legal proceedings. Investigators concluded that Brooks had helped bring victims into Corll's presence, allowing the crimes to continue over an extended period. Henley's role was considered even more significant. After becoming associated with Corll in 1972, Henley actively persuaded friends and acquaintances to accompany him to locations where Corll was waiting. During questioning, he stated that Corll had paid him for bringing victims. That admission became an important part of the investigation because it illustrated the organized nature of the relationship between the two men. Despite Henley's cooperation after Corll's death, investigators did not view his confession as eliminating his own responsibility. While his decision to reveal the burial sites allowed authorities to recover victims and uncover the full scope of the crimes, prosecutors maintained that his earlier participation remained a serious criminal offense. The courtroom proceedings reflected that distinction. Henley was recognized as the individual whose confession had exposed the truth, but he was also prosecuted for his involvement in the crimes that had occurred before August 1973. His cooperation helped investigators solve one of the nation's most notorious serial murder cases, yet it did not erase the consequences of the choices he had made. Brooks faced a similar legal reality. Although he claimed that he had not initially understood the full extent of Corll's actions, investigators concluded that he had continued participating after becoming aware of what was happening. That continued involvement formed the basis of the prosecution's case against him. For the families of the victims, the trials represented an opportunity to see some measure of justice carried out, even if the principal offender could no longer be held personally accountable. Nothing presented in court could restore the lives that had been lost or erase years of uncertainty and grief. Still, the legal process formally acknowledged the crimes and recognized the suffering endured by the victims and their loved ones. Following the proceedings, both men received severe sentences. David Owen Brooks was sentenced to life imprisonment. Elmer Wayne Henley was also sentenced to multiple consecutive life terms. Those sentences reflected both the extraordinary seriousness of the crimes and the unprecedented scale of the investigation that had uncovered them. Yet even as the legal process concluded, many questions remained beyond the reach of the courtroom. Investigators confirmed at least 28 victims connected to Corll. Even so, some believe the actual number could have been higher. Because no additional evidence sufficient to establish further victims was found, the official count remained unchanged. The uncertainty surrounding the total number became one of the enduring aspects of the case, reminding investigators that some questions in criminal investigations may never receive complete answers. The impact of the case extended far beyond the verdicts. Across Houston, residents struggled to understand how so many disappearances had remained unconnected for such a long period. Families who had followed news reports over the previous several years now realized that incidents once viewed as isolated tragedies were all linked to a single offender. The investigation also exposed important weaknesses in the handling of missing person cases during that era. Authorities recognized that fragmented record-keeping and limited communication between agencies had made it more difficult to identify patterns involving multiple disappearances. In later years, improvements in information sharing and greater attention to repeated missing person reports would become part of the lasting legacy of the Coral investigation. Perhaps the most unsettling lesson involved trust itself. Dean Coral had not relied on dramatic acts to attract attention. Instead, investigators concluded that he had built an ordinary public image through small acts of generosity and familiarity. Many victims encountered him through people they already knew, making suspicions seem unnecessary. That ordinary appearance became one of the reasons the crimes remained hidden for so long. For surviving family members, however, the legacy of the case could never be measured solely through legal reforms or historical significance. Each confirmed identification represented a son, a brother, or a friend whose absence had left an irreplaceable void. Years spent searching, hoping, and waiting eventually gave way to certainty, but certainty did not lessen the pain. It merely replaced unanswered questions with permanent loss. Today, the Dean Coral case remains one of the most studied serial murder investigations in American criminal history. It is remembered not because of the notoriety of the offender, but because of the profound impact it had on the victims' families, on law enforcement practices, and on the understanding of how repeated disappearances can sometimes conceal a much larger tragedy. The case stands as a reminder that behind every missing person report is an individual life and a family waiting for answers. It also demonstrates why every disappearance deserves careful attention, no matter how ordinary it may initially appear. In Houston, those lessons came at an extraordinary human cost, one measured not only by the number of confirmed victims, but by the years of uncertainty endured before the truth was finally uncovered. The conclusion of the legal proceedings did not bring an end to the story. In many ways, it marked the beginning of a different chapter, one defined not by the search for a killer, but by the long process of understanding the consequences left behind. The names of the victims gradually became more than entries in investigative files. They became reminders that each disappearance had represented a unique life interrupted, a family forever changed, and a future that would never be realized. For many relatives, the years before the investigation reached its conclusion had been filled with uncertainty. Without clear answers, hope had persisted even when it seemed increasingly fragile. Some believed their sons might have started new lives elsewhere. Others feared the worst, but had no evidence to confirm those fears. Living between those two possibilities created an emotional burden unlike ordinary grief. There was no funeral, no final goodbye, and no certainty about what had happened. The discoveries made after Henley's confession brought that uncertainty to an end, but certainty carried its own weight. Families who had spent years searching were forced to confront the reality that the people they loved would never return. Although investigators were able to identify many of the victims, no investigation could restore the years that had been lost or erase the suffering caused by prolonged uncertainty. The impact extended beyond individual households. Communities throughout Houston also faced difficult questions. Residents looked back on the early 1970s and wondered whether signs had existed that no one had fully recognized. The disappearances had occurred over several years, yet they had not initially been viewed as parts of a single pattern. Each case appeared isolated, making it difficult for both the public and investigators